Professor Asmroom Laggasaa, welcome to Gaaddisa Dhugaa program on Oromia News Network ONN.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Professor, you are one of the anthropologists who studied on the Gadaa system, Oromo Gadaa system extensively. What initiated you to study the Oromo Gadaa system?
Partly because of my personal experiences in Ethiopia, in Eritrea. In my childhood, I used to hear a lot about the Oromo from my great-grandfather, who was a colleague of Onesimus Nasib in Mkullu. He was much younger, Onesimus was much younger than my great-grandfather, but he grew up in the mission and then ultimately became a priest and ended up translating the Bible into Oromo. As my great-grandfather and his colleagues translated the Bible into Tigrinya, so they were colleagues. So because of that, in my childhood, I heard a lot about the Oromo. So when I came to think about doing my research, I ended up selecting Oromo, partly because of these experiences that I had as a child, and partly because the evangelical church in Ethiopia is half people from Wallagga, half people from Eritrea, so I ended up having a lot of Oromo friends in the church as well. So because of all that, I decided to do research on Eritrea. And now that was my second choice, actually. My first choice was to do a study of customary laws in Eritrea, but I was prohibited from doing that research because the EPLF, not the PLF, the ELF was just getting started in Ethiopia in 1960, and they didn't want me anywhere near Eritrea, so they said, go back and do another dissertation, honor people that you choose, so I ended up choosing Oromo.
What was the main challenge when you were working on Gadaa and publishing your first book, Gadaa?
The main challenge is that you had no support when you were doing this kind of research. I didn't get any support from Oromos, I didn't get any support from other Ethiopians as well. The other Ethiopians thought that I was on a fool's mission, trying to do a study of the political institutions of the Oromo. They have no political institutions. Why do that? Was the questions that my colleagues were asking me. And so I was on my own, basically, in doing the research. But that's not entirely true, because there were some people, my students, for instance, at the University of Haile Selassie University, were interested in learning about Gadaa, and one of them, Bai Salemu, ended up writing extensively about Gadaa as a result of that encounter. So the hurdles were really Ethiopian views about the Oromo, that they didn't see any point in studying Oromo culture, mainly because they didn't think that they had a culture, you know. So my mission became to let Ethiopians and others know that Oromo have a culture and they have a magnificent system of political organization which is thoroughly democratic, and an example of indigenous democracy in Africa. And unfortunately, at that stage, British anthropologists, others, were writing about African institutions, and were saying basically there are only two kinds of Africans: those who have kings and chiefs, and those who have no kings or chiefs. If you don't have no kings or chiefs, you are a stateless society. You have no political institutions, essentially, is what they're saying. Well, I said, basically, I beg to disagree. Here's a people who have democratic institutions that are not based on kingship or chieftaincy, but nonetheless, it's a full-fledged political system. It's not just the absence of kings that tells us something about the Oromo. So that became my mission, and I clashed with the British writers who wrote, like Paul Baxter, who wrote about the Oromo in Kenya, and he says the Gadaa is purely a religious system. It's a system of rituals, Jila, and other than that, they have no political institutions whatsoever. You know, well, Oromo distinguish sharply between Jila and non-Jila. Jila is rituals, celebration like Irecha, it's a ritual, but Gadaa is a secular political institution that is based on the human life cycle, so that at each stage of life you assume different responsibilities. from childhood until old age. When you reach the 6th Gada, you're called Gada and you rule the nation for 8 years, exactly 8 years. You use the calendar to determine that. So you dare not extend your term by any length of time. You're elected into office and you remain in office for exactly 8 years. So this is a democratic system, very much like the Western democracies. So the idea that there are no democracies in Africa is itself a completely nonsensical idea. And here I am ready to prove to you that such an institution exists in Africa.
Thank you, Professor. You are well known among Oromos, especially the Borona Oromos. And in addition to this, you have also said that we have also good relations with Gada leaders, Abba Gadas.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, how do you explain your relationship with Gada leaders or Abba Gadas?
Oh, they are fascinated because the first time that I met an Abba Gada, who was just Jaldes Liban, they were completely intrigued by the fact that I was intrigued about Gada, because the Christians, Highlanders that they meet in Ethiopia, have no interest in Gada whatsoever, and they don't understand it. You know, they can live there all their lives and not know that all this political system is in full swing among the Oromo, and they're not aware of it. You know, so it's a clash of cultures. To give you an example of the clash of cultures, at the time that I went to Borana, the day of the market was based on the astronomical calendar. And the Christians of the area could never figure out what day it is that the market is held. So I have to ask a Borana, is today market day, and so on. So there's a gap between them and the population that came and settled among them. And they are very strong about their culture. They keep their faith, they keep their beliefs, their values. And often what happens is it's the Amharas who go to Borana who learn Borana, not the Borana learn Amharic. There are very few Boranas who speak Amharic, very few. A few who went to school, but otherwise they don't speak it. So if you go to the marketplace, either you do your shopping in Oromo or you don't shop. So the settlers have become assimilated by the Borana. That's how strong they are as a culture. And also missionaries have been trying to convert them to Christianity for a very long time, unsuccessfully, because they say we have a religion, Waka, the one and only God. So we don't have to have another religion and so on. But there are missionaries who keep trying, and with some modest success, because essentially they allow Christianity and Oromo religion to merge. And they create a mixture of the two in their rituals, in the Catholic rituals, like Hari Racha, the blessing of the animal before its sacrifice. Sacrificing an animal on the occasion of Sunday with the Oromo communities. This is an adaptation that they made in order to win over the Oromo into their faith. You know.
I also heard that you were invited by the Bagada to his compound or his office, and then you began studying Gada from there. Can you tell us?
Yeah, from his own. Well, he came. He had. I was told by my research assistant Tari Jarso that the Bagada is in town for the weekly market. And so I said, please invite him to my house so we can fix a meal for him. So we did. We fixed a Dorowet meal, chicken meal, and that chicken are taboo in Borana. You don't eat chicken. And so they sat and ate all the sauce, but none of the meat, and they're giggling about it. They're laughing and joking. And the Bagada told them, "Shut up and eat. He's given you what he has." And so then he ordered them, basically, that I'm going to go with them to the village to live with them. And he ordered two of his assistants with hand axes and flashlights to lead me into the village by clearing the forest as you're doing that. So it took us 5 hours to get to the village. It's only about less than 20 kilometers away. But we arrived there in the dead of night, total darkness. And so they started a bonfire in order to allow me to see my new home and allow the community to see their guest. So then he told me to put your tent between the huts of my two wives, Masula and Terry. Right between them you put the tent, and they'll furnish you with all the food or anything else that you might need. And so I started my work from within the Olla Arbora, the capital, in other words, of the Gada institution, working with the Adula councillors as my chief informants. And I spent 5 months in the village, just learning about Gada and about their meetings, about their procedures, the language of democracy, the rules of democracy, rules of conduct. All of that I was able to document during the 5 months that I stayed among them. And then after that, I ended up meeting 4 other Abagada, Kobawule, Julaga, Madagalma, and Guyowuru. These 4 I've got to know quite well, except Madagalma was a very difficult man. He's a warrior, and warriors are not interested in telling stories. So he wouldn't tell me anything about his great achievement, which is the war against the Marahan Somali. Big campaign with 500 horsemen and 500 firearms. It was a big thing, but he never would speak about it, because it is not proper to brag about your achievements in Oromo culture. You have to be modest about it. And so after he died in 1995, I managed to get people like Borbule and other elders to tell me about the war. And I ended up getting a very detailed documentation of the war, how it was fought, how many Chibras they had. Chibra is age regiment. He had 11 age regiments, 500 horses, 500 firearms, and the rest foot soldiers with spears. And he fought against this Marahan Somali and drove them out of Liban. They had actually penetrated deep inside Liban. He drove them out. So it was a big achievement. The Ethiopian government, which was then at war with the Somalis, said, "Well done." Nobody punished them or anything else. They said, "You're contributing to the national effort to fight the Somalis." So it's been a fascinating encounter with the Abagadas, and the deeper I go into Gada, the more interested they become, because in a sense they are also learning about their institution. So there are learned men like Aruna Mata, who was my teacher, who knows all about stars and history and chronology and everything. He even knows the genealogies of the councillors, individual genealogies. He'll tell them who their ancestors are, So he's just a fund of knowledge, this man, and he became my teacher. And essentially the first book was written on the strength of Aruna Mata and the council, the Gada Council, which allowed me to sit in on their meetings and also to call meetings for the purpose of my investigation. So they'd call experts, they'd call all the Hayus, and Abagada would Lallaba, he'd announce that there's going to be a meeting today, so everybody has to show up. and they would sit all day discussing with me about Gada.
Your second book published was entitled Oromo Democracy.
Right.
And what makes it different? Does it have any difference
Yes,
with
big difference.
Gada? And
big difference. In Gada, I concentrated on the Gada institution and on the Borana. So I looked at nothing else. Only I wanted to get a deep understanding of how the Gada institution works when it is living, when it is actually working. Meetings taking place, gumi taking place, decisions being made, and penalties being imposed on people who violate their laws. All of that is a functioning system. So that was my focus in the first book. But the second book, what I tried to do was broaden my horizon on Oromo culture and incorporate knowledge about other branches of Oromo nation as well, particularly about the dual organization of the Oromo, the division of Oromo into Borana and Baretuma. These are big divisions that existed as far back as the 16th century. Bahri writes about it. And these are intermarrying groups. If you are Sabo, you're divided into two. In Borana, they are called Sabo and Gona. In nationally, they are called Borana and Baretuma. So if you are Sabo, you marry Gona. So half of the society is your sisters. You can't marry them. The other half are your in-laws, and they are legitimate candidates for marriage. So it's a very unique type of organization. So I studied the social as well as the political organization of the Borana, and there was quite a lot that I learned from them that places the Oromo in a special place in African studies, because at that stage the Africanists were saying, starting with the British, who were the founders of African ethnography, were saying Africans have either kings or chiefs, or they have nothing. Literally, if you don't have a king or a chief, then you have no political institutions, which is nonsense. Because here's Oromo, who don't have kings, who don't have chiefs, and yet they have a full-fledged political system. So my task, my mission, was to persuade the academic community that they have to look beyond the surface, beyond the first typology produced by a British anthropologist, to say, what is African culture like when it is democratic? And that was an unknown. There was only a few places, like Ian Lewis in Somalia called the Somalis a democracy. That's not entirely correct. But in South Africa, the Botswana has a full-fledged democracy. It's a kingdom, but within that, democratic institutions. The Baganda, likewise, in Uganda, have a king, the Kabaka, but along with that, they have a parliament called Lukiko. So these people have done what the British have done. They kept the kings, but they also had parliamentary institutions along with that. So all these bits of evidence indicate that you cannot dismiss all Africans as being either based on kingship or nothing. That is a completely mistaken perspective. It took me years to persuade people of that, but I think I've now gotten the message across.
Professor, as we can see from this, the poster behind us, and then after about 44 years of work on the Gada democracy, you have your third book about to be published by the same title, Gada.
Right.
Even though there is one
exactly
difference.
There is a letter added to my new book.
So
the first book was Gada, like this. And now this additional A is to reflect the long vowels in Oromo that are reflected in Kube.
So does it have any difference as a content between the first Gada book published?
Big difference. Only the life cycle phenomena from childhood to old age. That description that I gave earlier on is there exactly as it was before. Nothing changed in that. But then all kinds of changes, internal and external changes, took place in Oromia. One is the coming and going of the Derg, which completely upset life of Borana people, because a lot of people were recruited into the army and sent to a war they didn't understand, and they got massacred in the process. So there's a lot of pain associated with the Derg era. But other changes as well. You know, Emperor Haile Selassie is gone. Once he's gone, then you have to deal with a completely different kind of political organization. So all the people, all the balabats that were appointed by Emperor Minilik suddenly lost their jobs, and you have to deal now with during the Derg with the ISAPA, the Communist Party, and its officials, which is a completely different ball game, and I think it was pretty disturbing for people.
So when I see this poster behind me, it's I can see stars, and then it says Lami, Busa, Bakalcha, Gajima, Arbagado, Labas.
Right.
What does it tell us?
Borana are very conscious of time and history. They have a history that covers 500 years. For 500 years, the Abagadas have been taking power every 8 years and handing over. Just recently, on March 4th of this year, handover took place in Borana, the handover took from the son of Babule to the son of Julaga. So that goes on. It's the same institution that's been going on for 500 years. So Borana have a sense of history. History is a reality to them, because history, they believe, repeats itself. So you have to be on the lookout for who was your 8th generation ancestor, because whatever happens during his period will happen to you too. So it's good you try to live up to it. If it's bad, you have to try to avoid it. And so, sense of history, sense of time. And they have a calendar based on knowledge of astronomy and the lunar motion, the movement of the moon. So what they do is they know these. They have these 7, now 8 stars called Triangulum, Pleiades, Aldebaran, Bellatrix, the central part of Orion, Saiph, and Sirius, and then now Procyon. In Oromo, they are called Lami, Busan, Bakalcha, Al-Gajima, Arbgaddu, Urjiwalla, Basa Guddo, and this one, Basadiko. So these are the stars that they use for time reckoning purposes. And what they do is they look at the moon. The lunar motion is very complicated. Very complicated, because it's the product of 2 movements. The product of the moon going around the earth, and the product of the moon and the earth going around the sun. So the way you see the moon is a very complicated business to understand it. I couldn't figure it out, I mean, during the time that I was doing field work, you know. And so they used lunar motion in conjunction with these stars. When the moon appears with the first star, it is Bitakara Bitotesa. The first month, let's say first day of the year. And then after that, the moon appears the next month with the second star. The next month with the third star, and so on down the line. And so by just looking at the new moon and seeing where on the horizon the new moon is and the star is, and on that basis decide that there's a conjunction between the two, and from that they know what the day is and what the month is. They can do this for the entire year. This is a very, very precise calendar based on astronomical observations of the moon and the stars. Very complex, difficult to understand. Now, what happened in the mid-1970s, after my book was published, was 2 archaeologists went to Kenya, and there was a site in Kenya called Namaratunga, where they had 19 pillars on the ground. And each pillar was tilted in different directions. It's not anything like the megalithic Kushites who built graves, and on the graves they had these huge slabs of stone that are beautifully carved. These have nothing to do with graves. They're just pillars planted in the ground, but pointing in different directions. So the 2 archaeologists figured out that this may be connected to the astronomical calendar of the Borana. Why? Because these may be pointing at the place in the sky where the star is going to be when it's in conjunction with the moon, when there's Daha. So they checked this, and it turned out that each one of the pillars points at one of the stars precisely at the time of the conjunction with the new moon, precisely. Less than 1 degree error. That's very precise. And so they proved that there's a connection between the archaeological site and the astronomical calendar. They dated the calendar using bones that were found in one of the sites, not Namaratunga, but the other sites. There was a bone. With the bone, they were able to do radiocarbon dating, and they were able to determine that the age of these pillars, the time when they were planted, was 300 before Christ. This at the time when Aksum was at its peak, and was when the kingdom of Kush in Egypt was at its peak. So they are contemporaries. The founders of this calendar are contemporaries of the kingdom of Kush and Aksum. And so because of that, UNESCO has now come around to acknowledging that this is major find in Africa. It is the first archaeoastronomic site in the African continent that connects a living culture with archaeological remains that are 2,000 years old. This is a major discovery. And it's a source of pride for me, it's a source of pride for the Oromo nation. It's a big deal. So that, and also the recognition of Oromo culture, Oromo institutions, and Oromo astronomy calendar, and the archaeological site as a World Heritage Site. And my book will go straight to UNESCO when I finish it to strengthen their information about the Oromo culture that they have recognized as World Heritage.
I was about to ask you about the Gada recognition into the UNESCO, and then Gada democracy or Gada system was recognized in UNESCO as World Heritage.
Yeah.
You have been studying about Gada before some 40 years ago. What do you feel right now when you see it before?
Oh, tremendous satisfaction about the fact that you're not just getting recognition of people who read the book and learn about Oromo, but you begin to realize that this is being recognized by world institutions as a heritage that is of some great consequence. So this is a source of great pride for me and for the Oromo people.
What's expected from the Oromo people and other this Gada system loving nations and societies to keep this world heritage civilization to continue in the future?
Oh, now, because they have received recognition, and all of a sudden there's a tremendous amount of interest in Ethiopia, in the Oromo Khalil, about the culture. So clearly people are becoming conscious of the fact that they have a heritage that they can be proud about, and they can talk about it and write about it and keep it going, keep it alive. Yeah.
You have been teaching Gada system and Oromos residing in Eritrea for a long period of time, and you were also participating in Recha, Oromo Thanksgiving festivals held there in Eritrea. So how do you explain your relation with the Oromos residing in Eritrea?
In Eritrea, our relationship is very good. The few Oromos who are living in Eritrea have taken a course with me about Gada, and they did very well with the test. They were tested at the end of that. But my hope is that the book will be able to disseminate widely, worldwide, and will not happen what happened with my first book. My first book was out of print within a few years, and then people could no longer buy it. Well, this time I'm having the book published myself. I'm paying for it and disseminating it through Oromo communities worldwide. So any community in the world that is interested in having access to Gada can write to me, and I'll send them a batch of books that they can sell to the community, and it will be sold at 1/3 of its price. It's going to be sold at Amazon for $90. It will be sold to the Oromo community only at $30. So people will be able to order that, and I'll send posters like this to all the major communities in the world, so that they can post that on their halls and allow people to order the book and get themselves a copy.
Just tell us about this new Gada publications, and then about the papers.
Right. Well, the book is being published with great care by a publisher called Regent Publishers in Hong Kong, which is a very high quality publisher. It's going to be published on acid-free paper, which does not turn over the years, turn yellow and start breaking up. So because of the acid content. So the paper is going to be acid-free, and the book is going to be bound with thread, not with glue, which means after a generation has passed, the book is not going to fall apart to pieces because the glue will come undone. So it's a very well produced book. It's called a 40th Anniversary Heritage Edition, meaning we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of my book published in 1973. I'm cheating a little here because it's not exactly 40 years, but 40 years is important in Oromo culture, so I'm calling it 40th Anniversary Heritage Edition, but it's actually 44 years since the publication of my first book. So the book will be widely available, and I'll continue to print more as the demand arises. In other words, it will never be out of print. In due course, I'll give the copyright to an Oromo institution, hopefully in Ethiopia, that will be able to publish more copies as they see fit.
Durra.
Yo.
Naga olin.
Oltat.
Rogosi man.
Rogosi michillet.
Manakam.
Mado.
Finchano.
Ilma armufat. Ate ho.
Marre. Tiyallen gostagantu. Manamboltu. Finchani ilma armufati. Waliganda kaya alfarona jagas. Adewari tolargin.
Aye.
Danjetu